Hey everyone, and welcome back to KBDECORCRAFTS. In today's video, we're going to be creating 4 fun and easy Valentine's Day DIYs. Each one was super budget friendly to make, and they look like pieces that you would find in stores. Alright, let's go ahead and jump right into our first DIY. For the first DIY, we're going to create some pom-poms. I've already shown on my channel how to create this pom-pom maker out of cardboard, but I'll go ahead and link it in the card above so you can watch how to make it. And I'm going to go ahead and use these 3 different colors from Dollar Tree. Once you have your pom-pom maker created, you can go ahead and start wrapping around the colored yarn of your choice. And I think I wrapped this around about 4 or 5 times. Once you've reached your desired thickness, you can then go ahead and cut off the yarn and then cut off an extra piece of yarn about 6 or 8 inches long that we'll be using later. Then taking the scissors, split in between the cardboards and start snipping all the way around the circle. Then taking that extra piece of yarn that we cut out, we're going to go ahead and wrap it around the entire pom-pom, starting at the very top where the opening is of the pom-pom maker. You want to make sure that the yarn is going in between the 2 pieces of cardboard. Then you'll go ahead and double knot it as tight as possible. And then go ahead and remove the pom-pom out of the cardboard carefully. Then taking a piece of cardstock paper that I cut out to be about the size of the shape that I wanted, I folded that in half and then drew out a heart shape that would be just about the size that I needed this pom-pom to be. Then of course, go ahead and cut out your heart shape. So this will now be your guide when it comes to cutting out your heart shape out of the pom-pom. Then taking your pom-poms in your hand, you're going to kind of want to split the pieces of the yarn in half as to where the top of the heart would be. Then place your guide on top of the pom-pom, grabbing the 2 longest pieces to roll them up by your thumb to not cut those off. Then grabbing a nice pair of sharp scissors, go ahead and start to trim off the excess yarn, tracing around the heart. There's really no right or wrong way to do this. You just want to keep trimming off until you have your desired shape. Now once taking the stencil off, you want to look in the front of the heart and start trimming off some of the pieces just to kind of shorten out the front part of your pom-pom. I've seen some people make these really short and really cute, but I was too afraid to go too short and ruin it, so I just left it to a certain length that I was happy with, and I like the shape of this heart. For my garland, I made 2 reds, 2 pinks, and 3 whites. Now I'm just going to be using some jute string for this. I did cut it out to be about 6 feet long, and then on one end I went ahead and made a loop that I'll be hanging this garland with. Now taking the other end of the string, I'm going to be threading through these beads that I'll have in the description box down below, and I'm going to be using 2 smalls and 1 medium for the pattern that I'm going to create. To help me thread these through easier, I'll be using one of these crafting needles, but you could also use some tape at the end of the jute string to pull my beads through. Then I'm going to pull them through all the way to the other side where the loop is, and then create a knot right at the end of the bead to make sure that they won't slide around. Then taking one of the white hearts, I'm going to go ahead and tie it around the jute string, creating a double knot. Now I'm going to create another knot where I'd like the next set of my beads to begin, and this was about 4 inches apart from the other set of beads. Then just strand onto the next set of beads and then another knot and then another heart and continue the pattern. Once the garland was all done, I also created another loop at the end to be able to hang it, and I didn't like how the hearts would slide all around, so I took my hot glue gun and added a dab of glue just underneath the little knot and attached it to the jute string. And this definitely did the trick to make sure that they wouldn't slide around when I hung it up. And here it is hung up on my wall. I'm really happy with how this turned out, and I think it looks super cute. For our next DIY, I'm taking one of these heart-shaped wreath forms from Dollar Tree and some pliers and removing off the middle section of the wreath form. And make sure not to throw away the other piece of heart wire because you can use it for another DIY. Now I'll be using some of my macrame cord that I'll have linked down below, but you can also use some of this white nautical rope from Dollar Tree that you can just take apart to use. Now, the cord I'm using is 4 millimeters thick and it'll measure out to be about the same of the nautical rope. I'm going to be cutting out 3 strands to make a normal braid. Now I didn't measure this in length, I just wrapped it around the wire to see exactly how long I needed the cord to be to make the braid to then cut, and I added about an extra 3 inches more and then, like I said, just cut out 3 strands. Then taking the tips of the cord, I'm going to go ahead and place a little bit of hot glue at the top to adhere the tips. This will make it a lot easier to be able to braid. I just taped it down and began to do a normal 3-strand braid all the way to the end. Then taking the very end of the braid, I began to hot glue it onto the metal wire, starting with the inner part of the wreath form. Now when gluing it down, you're going to want to work in sections, making sure to pull nice and tightly as you glue down. Now I realized I wanted to have a little bit more support for the next strands of braids around the entire wreath form, so I went ahead and added just little pieces of the macrame cord in different sections, especially on the very top, to be able to glue down my braids. Now here you'll be able to see what I mean about adding that extra support around the entire wreath form. And then go ahead and take your next braid and begin to hot glue it all the way around the heart. You're just going to continue this pattern, adding another strand of braid around the entire wreath form till you get to the very end of the metal. You'll see that adding that extra support really helped keep the shape of the heart when wrapping the braids around. Once you're completely done, you'll have this completely covered and it should look something like this. We're also going to be adding braids on the top and the bottom, mainly to be able to hide the top part of the seam of where we started the braids. Now I just cut off another 6 inches of cord to be able to create another 3-strand braid for the top and for the bottom. Now go ahead and do the same steps as before by gluing the tips and then making your braid. Then on the bottom, go ahead and wrap the braid around the entire middle section and then glue around on the back side. Once you have it all glued down, go ahead and cut off any excess piece of the braid. Now for the top, I really wanted to cover up the seams of where the braids began, so I created 2 of the braids and then just hot glued them just like I did the bottom. I made sure to utilize the braid to cover up any of the seam that was showing. I did want to mention that this was inspired by a piece that I saw at Target for their Valentine's Day collection. Now, I've shown how to make a tassel plenty of times on my channel, but I'll link a card up above so you can check that out. But this will just be a quick step-by-step of how I made this tassel. I used some of the jute string and I wrapped it around this piece of cardboard about 20 times. Then cutting out another piece of string, I went ahead and stuck that through the middle of the tassel. So go ahead and remove the cardboard, and at the very bottom center, you'll want to cut the tassel in half. Then with the two pieces of strings in the middle, go ahead and double knot it. Then pulling both ends over together, go ahead and grab another piece of string and then tie off the top portion of your tassel. Make sure you double knot it, and then I like to take the two ends and wrap it around the top part of the tassel a few times and then tuck it in. And also don't forget to trim off the ends of your tassel and you'll have something like this. For the tassel, I just decided to put a dab of hot glue at the very top and then just glue it onto the bottom of the heart. Taking a piece of scrap macrame cord, I also just made a little loop and hot glued it down at the very top of the back of the heart to be able to hang up my piece. And I just added some more hot glue to the back to make sure it was nice and supported, and you're all done. This was a really fun dupe to create, and I really love how it turned out, and the best part is that it only cost me about $4 to make. For our next DIY, I'm going to be using one of these new Dollar Tree signs that I saw this year, and I knew I had to pick up because it was a perfect already faux wooden frame sign. So I'm going to begin by removing off the frame and just taking off any excess paper, and this came off super easy, so I went ahead and just removed all of those, and then I realized that the paper comes off pretty easy off of this particle board as well. Then using this shiplap scrapbook paper that I found at Hobby Lobby, I'm going to go ahead by cutting out the exact amount that I need to cover up this sign. Now, I originally thought I could use the spray adhesive to glue on this scrapbook paper to the particle board, but all that did was absorb into the board. So instead, I just grabbed my Mod Podge, and that worked really good. When gluing on a piece of scrapbook paper like this, I like to work in sections to be able to make sure to get the least amount of bubbles underneath the paper. You want to make sure to smooth down the paper as much as possible to get out any of the air pockets. Then grabbing another piece of paper, I'm going to be creating a bigger heart this time that will be used as another guide or stencil. Now for the size of the heart, I wanted to make sure that it was going to be a little bit more than half of the size of this sign. Now you'll want to just eyeball it and see how big you want it or how small you want it, and then go ahead and cut it down to size. For this next step, I'm using 3 different color felt paper. Now you can use whatever you'd like to trace for your circle, but I just found this little container that I wanted to trace around and then cut out a square shape, then to begin cutting out my circle. So I just went ahead and cut out my circle, and if you didn't realize by now, we're going to be creating some felt flowers. Once the circle is now cut out, then we're going to go ahead and create a spiral around the inner part of the circle. Now this step might be easier to watch than explain, but this becomes a lot easier once you create several of these flowers, but this was my very first one, so I was trying to be super careful. Now when you start to get to the end, you want to leave a small circle that will be the very bottom of your flower. So when you're done, you'll have a little spiral like this. Then taking the very tip of the spiral, you're going to start to fold that in inward and continue to fold it in all the way to the bottom. Once you get towards the bottom, make sure to add a little bit of hot glue to hold it in place. I'm using fabric glue, but a regular hot glue would hold just fine. Then with that remaining piece, go ahead and hot glue it to the bottom of the flower. Once it's fully dry, you can then cut off the excess of the bottom piece. And then you'll have a cute little felt flower. Now I made several different sizes and these different colors. I did red, pink, and more of a peachy tone color, but I did some small, big, and medium sizes. Then taking that heart cutout, I'm going to go ahead and trace it onto the scrapbook paper. I was initially going to glue the flowers onto the heart, but then I decided against it, and I'm glad I did because it looks a lot better just being placed onto the scrapbook paper. Now before gluing anything down, you want to map out where you want your flowers to go, arranging in different sizes and the colors, and once you have that perfected, you can go ahead and start hot gluing them. And the key here is to make sure that the flowers are arranged in the shape of the heart. And once I had them arranged how I wanted, I just started to hot glue them down. Once I was done hot gluing, I took my eraser and just erased all of the pencil marks. Then I just hot glued the pieces of the frame back onto the sign. Now I think this would make a pretty sign all on its own, but I wanted to add one of these metal little Valentine's Day words that Dollar Tree puts out for every holiday, and I thought it looked pretty with love or XOXO, so I decided to glue that one on. And this is the final product, and I really love how this one turned out, and it looks so cute on my table. For the last DIY, I'm using one of these Dollar Tree cutouts that they put out for Valentine's Day, and I went ahead and just cut off the string that was on the back because I'm just going to be using this as a tabletop decor. I'll be using ballet slippers and the Waverly chalk paint, but you can also use Cameo Pink and Apple Barrel acrylic paint. Now with this, I'm going to be taking a smaller brush and only painting the outer edges of this sign and making sure not to get any paint on the top part. You want to make sure to also get in on the inner parts of the letters as well. Now I know it's hard to see here, but for any little bits of paint that I did get on the top, I just used some sandpaper to remove the paint and it came off really easily. Dollar Tree also had this XOXO sign that I did the same thing with a red paint. You could totally leave them as is, but I just started playing around with some paint that I had on hand and started adding some little flowers on the love sign, and then I believe I added some hearts and some other little details that made this super girly, and I just love it, and it's perfect for Valentine's Day. I just love how girly and pretty this one looks, and I love how it looks in my decor. So that's it for today's DIY video. I hope you all enjoyed them and you get a chance to recreate them. And if you do, make sure to tag me on Instagram so I can share your work. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to see more videos like these. I would also love to know which one was your favorite out of all these DIYs. I'll see you guys in my next one.